Nancy.
Hi,
So everybody, I'm so glad that Bentley Johnson, who's the Senior Partnerships Manager for the Michigan League of Conservation Voters, is here to speak with us. And Bentley is your former staffer for Senator Peters, is that right?
Right, yep.
And in that role, and as a staffer at Michigan League of Conservation Voters, which is an organization that, similar to CCL, although focused on state level, MLCV is very, I would say, focused on solutions that work and bipartisan. So I thought that, the kind of work that you do and the experience that you have would be relevant to the work that we're doing, focusing on carbon pricing at the national level. So we'd love to hear your thoughts and your perspective on where things are and where things are going in 2021. So thanks, Bentley. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I launch into just, before I launch into what I think is possible or what I think the landscape is, let me first say that, it's hard to look in the crystal ball and speculate, period. These days with kind of realignment within, I would say, both political parties and just political realignment and a lot of ways political chaos, it's even harder to know what kind of opportunities are out there. But what I think CCL really understands is that you try to control what you can control, and that is bringing really high quality information and experts, as well as a really organized campaign structure, which you all have, across the country. And you work, and you execute your game plan, and you push your message and keep hammering it home, and you never know when your window is going to be. Even if the political stars don't seem to be lining up, you never know what type of opportunity you might be able to get. And I've always admired that about CCL, is that number one, I think the solution that you're behind, and that Energy Innovation Act and the fee and dividend proposal is one that can appeal to the whole spectrum of politics. And then it's also there's an element of kind of there's a populist element to it, with the dividend part of it. And I think we've seen that emerge in both parties as something that is a priority in focusing on people who are hurting, working people, and in the solution. So I'll just start by saying that, and by saying take everything with what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because it could all be flipped on its head, or so on and so forth. But I'll also ask, how are people feeling after the election? And feel free to jump in and or chat, how a few words. Anyone have you sorted out your feelings after the election?
Definitely more hopeful.
Yeah. I would say, for me, I would say I'm feeling hopeful, but at the same time, when it comes to a challenge like climate change, it's almost like anything less than full on kind of all hands on deck feels like we're coming up really short. Mm-hmm. So the fact that, I was really hoping that this would be a window where we'd have climate champions in the House, the Senate, the White House, and it would be a clear margin of, that would, pro-environment, pro-conservation majority would be very clear. And that's not quite the case. I mean, things couldn't be tighter, in Congress. The House narrowed, as you all know. The Senate is still up for grabs in terms of who will be in the majority. But whoever is the majority leader in the Senate is going to need to get anything done is going to need members of the other party really to come along for anything, really anything substantial. And so we're going to need solutions that bring people to the table. And a price on carbon is one of those solutions that I think, that Republicans that take climate change seriously can get behind. Now, there's going to be, I think, some decision makers that it'll never, there'll be some decision makers on the left that it's going to be hard to please. Anything short of the full Green New Deal is going to be tough to get their support. There's going to be folks on the right that will say no almost to anything that deals with climate change, given the denial of science that we've seen on the right across the board. But there's a big middle that knows climate change is happening, accept the climate science, and just differ and know we need to do something about it, but differ on the scale and the tactics in the policy. So that's a good thing. I'm feeling especially important. Here's where I'll start with the Biden Harris administration. I'm feeling especially encouraged by the administration coming in. And that's because LCV really looks at the 2020 election as this was a climate election. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have the most ambitious plan for climate action and environmental justice of any president and vice president elect ever. And, more than 81 million voters turned out in support of Biden and Harris, more than have ever voted for any president in history. And so, and while there was some hemming and hawing on a few, issues like fracking in Pennsylvania, for instance, by and large, Joe Biden embraced aggressive climate action and did it in a way that centers workers and justice. And Biden and Harris understand how climate change is interwoven through racism, through the economy, through the pandemic even. And so as we're heading into their administration and we're looking at the transition and we're looking at the people that they're putting in place, one of the mantras is personnel is policy. So the people that we're seeing, in spots that will be helping filter information for the president, bringing information from different sectors, have climate right at the top of their list. The national, we still have yet to see some of the key spots in the climate, energy, and environment, positions. But, they've named kind of a national security team. They've named an economic team. And, between John Kerry as the climate leader on the National Security Council, along with several other advisors, climate couldn't be more of a priority there. There was a little bit of debate, over this guy, Brian Deese, as National Economic Council director, but there's, he comes from a financial firm and just concerns about ties to embracing capitalism as part of the solution. But there's no question that he's been a longtime climate policy expert, and he's been a national LCV board member in the past. But there's, down the list, there's been economic appointments and just cabinet and administration appointments that at least LCV feels like reflects the diversity of our country. Women, immigrants, people of color, who would be the first to serve in their respective roles. I think he's really building a team that emphasizes competence and experience, as well as inclusion and hopefully equity, and hopefully climate continues to be on the top of the list. So I'm optimistic about the Biden Harris administration in terms of who's going to be put in key decision-making roles. Now, before I keep going, remind me how much time I have here, and I would like to save some time for obviously questions and discussion and hear from you all too.
Yeah, so we like to finish all the Q&A and your part by 2:30, so another 15 minutes.
Yep, great. So we've established that President Biden and Vice President Harris will have the strongest mandate to act on climate and environmental justice in any administration in U.S. history. And we should say that. We should say it often. We should tell them that. We should tell the public. We should tell our members. And we should keep our foot on the gas and press them, because they have a lot of work to do, not only just to undo all the rollbacks that have happened, but to continue to push the line and push the envelope in terms of what an executive branch can do, regardless of what Congress does. So I'm happy to talk through what kind of actions the executive branch could do. But the campaign actually put forward a lot of specifics, and so you can really check out their plan. And he's made climate related and environmental related things, day one things like executive order type things, and centering, in addition to that, centering environmental justice, accelerating state, local, and tribal leadership. So there's a lot that President Biden can do without Congress, but Congress is more a little bit of the unknown. There will be serious headwinds for the Biden administration, but I'm confident that they'll know how to pull the levers of government to accomplish things. Congress is a little more unknown. First of all, I mentioned the Senate is still kind of up, but I think from a negative perspective, it's going to be unlikely that a big, huge climate change signature bill or package can make it kind of on its own through the Senate. I think that is a real challenge. However, on the flip side, I think there's lots of opportunities for major legislation that can have a huge climate and sustainability focus to it, and lots of provisions. So economic recovery, they have a week. Right now, they're working out a deal to fund the government. It remains to be seen how much relief, economic relief and COVID-related relief will be part of that package, and that's an ongoing negotiation. But one of the first things that is going to be on the agenda for this Congress, no matter who's in charge, is there's going to be a lot of pressure to do an economic recovery package. There's the House Democrats put forward and has passed. You have several packages, but the Democrats really have a $2 trillion package that is interwoven with advancing clean energy, reducing pollution, transportation electrification, transit, building retrofits, water infrastructure, natural climate solutions, affordable and sustainable housing. And so that is significant. That is a significant investment right away that can get the momentum going in the direction of reducing emissions and that sort of thing, including with a lot of the national environmental groups are really saying something to the effect of 40% of investments in an economic recovery package should have benefits in environmental justice communities. So there's that. Of course, there's always a budget and appropriations process, and I would note that the budget caps lift for fiscal year 2022 bills. So we've had these budget caps because of a previous, kind of debt agreement that has kind of limited the investment. So there's actually an opportunity to increase funding for priority programs, but there's also going to be a potential fight over the debt ceiling next summer. And you can expect, I think, Republicans now that have been quiet over the spending of the Trump administration are going to usher in a new message of economic austerity and concerns about the debt. Again, I think that's actually plays into favor for a cap and dividend proposal, but also it cuts the other way too in terms of just no raising taxes, no, expanding the, no bills expanding the debt and borrowing and things like that. So, and then we'll have other opportunities like there's a surface transportation bill that expires next September. And that's always an opportunity that doesn't come around every year. It comes around, every few years to advance climate goals, transit, smart growth policies. And probably another, and then of course there'll be congressional fights over nominations to the Biden-Harris administration. It'll be interesting to see what the administration does in terms of their nominations. Do they kind of lead with their nominees that are really aggressive on climate policy, or do they kind of temper themselves in anticipation of the opposition of Republicans in the Senate? Judicial appointments, of course, another real hot button issue that people will try to hold up for leverage on other issues. I'll say one thing about just like what I understand to be some of the makeup of the key committees that bills could go through in the House and Senate, and why I'm cautiously optimistic about those leaders making climate a priority and their receptivity. But Republicans have term limits on their chairs for committees. And then mix in some retirements, and we have some key committees that will have some new leadership. And I thought I had my notes pulled up on that, and I actually realized I have notes pulled up on administration nominees, but I think I can do a little bit of this from memory. The Environment and Public Works and the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate are two of the key, besides like appropriations and stuff, are two of the key committees, and there's going to be some shuffling there. Senator Barrasso, who is like from Wyoming, is a vehement kind of, not taking climate change seriously sort of senator who's lined up for the Environment and Public Works Committee, which is usually where a climate bill would go through in the Senate. He actually is lined up in both. He'll probably choose to chair the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, which is still a key committee, has jurisdiction over the Department of Interior and Department of Energy. But it's much more related to federal lands, public lands, and that sort of thing. And I think everyone assumes he's going to take chairmanship. This is if the Republicans do, in fact, maintain their majority. That he'll be on Energy and Natural Resources, and the Environment and Public Works would likely then see Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia, who, while West Virginia is a coal state, is much more amenable, I would say, to just all environmental priorities. So that's one. Those are kind of two key committees in the Senate. Over in the House, the Energy and Commerce Committee is a really key one. And from what I remember, Nita Lowey is retiring, which means there's some jockeying. Let's see. This is where my notes would really help. I can't remember who's going to sit in the chair for Energy and Commerce on the Democrats, but the Democrats will, push. Is it Frank Pallone? Anyway, the Democrats will push for strong climate legislation. It kind of depends on what policies emerge as favorites. And Republicans are it's likely to be Kathy McMorris Rodgers from Washington, who, the state of Washington is one of those, even though her district tends more conservative, it's one of those, states that, you could work with Kathy McMorris Rogers, I think, as the Republicans. But to kind of conclude my remarks, you're like, okay, well, what climate policies do we see as emerging? We've seen different policies put forward. I think increasingly there's momentum behind the standards and investment type of climate policy that underlies, the heart maybe of the Green New Deal. But I would say that's the case for a lot of the climate champions that we do see, particularly on the left. I think putting a price on carbon is still, and a carbon tax, and then, or fee and dividend, or fee and, different ideas about what to do with the revenue, is still the preferred course of action for your economic conservatives, and still very much remains an appealing policy choice across the board, in addition to weaving climate throughout all policy in every committee. I didn't even get to all the other environmental issues that could be on the table, from land and water conservation, which we know is key to addressing climate, and all the rest. Happy to talk about some of that, but I feel like I should stop here and see if y'all have ideas for me to pass along to National LCV, or questions that I can take a crack at answering.
Wow, great. Thank you, Ben. That was wonderful. I think we have few enough people that we can open it up for questions, but let me just start with one. And that is, in the previous session of Congress, one of the bills that was advocated by our representative, Debbie Dingell, and a lot of Democrats in Congress, and I believe there was a lot of support for this from big green organizations like LCV, Sierra Club, and some others, is the 100% Clean Economy Act. And that was a Democrat-only bill. So I'm just curious if you think that big green organizations are going to be continuing to push for legislation like that, that's, only supported by Democrats, in light of the fact that we really did not get a blue wave. How do you see, organizations such as yours pushing for, what types of bills?
Great question. I mean, like I said, I think, yeah. So first, I think that Dingell-led bill that, LCV definitely supported, that I really think was a messaging signaling bill in the last Congress, to just have as much broad-based support for taking action on climate change and promoting clean energy as possible. So I wouldn't necessarily think that, take it for granted that that's going to be kind of the approach. However, I do think big green groups will take that standards investments approach first and foremost, because there's going to be there's still going to be a clamor on both sides for economic recovery and those investments. So it's about steering those investments towards policies and programs that will get us to, 100% clean energy by 2035, pollution-free and affordable transportation options, zero emission new buildings by 2030. And that's kind of what we've seen from the Biden's Build Back Better plan. It's like they're, Biden's trying to create the mandate for big economic stimulus, if you want to say, but have that be done in a smart way, in a climate focused way, and in a way that centers environmental justice and workers at the center of it. So I do think you'll hear, I think, probably National LCV say standards-based investment led, and justice centered. And that can appeal. I mean, I think the political strategy behind that is that you can appeal to the Green New Deal folks, but you're not necessarily saying Green New Deal or bust. Like LCV is not, LCV is supportive of the Green New Deal, but they're not Green New Deal or bust. Very strategically. So it gives a way for members that are concerned about climate change to talk about it in a way that still keeps the Green New Deal kind of coalition, on board. I know that that's not fee and dividend, but I still feel personally that there's a role for putting a price on carbon within that framework.
Okay. Richard, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wondered whether Bentley has an opinion as to where Senator Peters is likely to be on climate this year.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you were following some of the campaign, there was things like, he came under a lot of heat from like the Sunrise Movement, for instance, to try and support the Green New Deal. It was he was trying to walk a line there, I think. And so he did things like he pledged not to take any fossil fuel money. Well, there's different definitions of fossil fuel money. So like, do you include DT and consumers, the utility money as part of that? And so he was butting heads a little bit with the Sunrise Movement, while at the same time saying we absolutely need to be kind of tackling climate change. Water still was kind of at the forefront of his messaging, and I think that will still be a priority. But I think you can pretty much expect Senator Peters to fall pretty closely in line with the Biden-Harris administration and really emphasize workers, take an especially active role in the auto industry's role in addressing climate change. And he's been really pushing electric vehicles, I know. And looking for those spots. I would also say nature-based solutions too. But I think he's still, honestly, I think he's still keeping a lot of his options open in terms of what policy. So he's not going to, right off the bat, he's not going to commit and say, this is the bill that needs to do it. This is my, I think he's going to sit back, see where some of the other leaders in both the Senate, the House, and the administration are going to be, and be where the momentum is. And I think a lot of decision makers will be the same way. So the more that we can develop champions that are willing to both push aggressively, but also push aggressively for specific policies. Like if you're a group that wants to see a specific policy or believes that a specific policy is the key, like you got to identify some of those champions and have them vocal, have them out there. Like there's lobbying in all the different definitions are effective. There's no lobbying I think that's more effective than a colleague in the Senate going specifically and saying, Gary, you got to get on board with my bill, or, here's why you need, that is very compelling because it's like, oh, so-and-so's, it's kind of like how we all operate. Like, oh, so-and-so down the street got solar panels on their house. Like I can afford that. I can do that, And so I think that is really key, is like finding those champions. And you've been laying the groundwork to do that through the Climate Solutions Caucus. And now's the time to be like, okay, caucus, you got to step up. Like we got to be hearing from you. Where's your op-ed? Where's your speech on the floor? And putting specific asks like that to use their bully pulpit.
Okay, great. Chris has her hand raised, so let's take one more question. And Chris, can you unmute yourself? And
yeah, thanks. Hi, Bentley.
Hi, Chris.
Hi. I just expand a little bit on the first question about carbon fee and dividend. In and of itself, I mean, if you were to come down from outer space and look at, climate change is a problem, what should we do about it? And look at the different solutions, taking a price on carbon and returning it to the economy in a dividend has been shown through modeling and just through common sense, really. And like we say, all the major economists, it seems like that's the most effective thing to do right now. And so I'm having a hard time understanding why over the years, why that hasn't been seen as the first step of what environmentalists should be promoting, in addition to, I mean, as along with whatever, Green New Deal investments and all the other ways you've been framing it. And I don't see why there's a conflict with that. It seems to me that the carbon fee and dividend should be in amongst all these other things. It's necessary, but not sufficient to solve the climate crisis, but it's definitely necessary. So I don't know if you wanted to expand a little bit more on why it's not something like, oh, look at this great bill, and why the other environmental groups aren't support. I'm just surprised that there isn't more support for it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of answers to that, and I'm not even sure which factors, like play the biggest role. But I agree with you. I think there's absolutely a place for it. Like it should be. So I'll try to run through a few reasons. So I think number one is like the point I made, like if people don't feel like there's a window politically to move climate legislation, they don't want to like pick, get locked in with a particular policy proposal and then have that be the one that, that dies on the vine or is like very criticized by whoever. You know what I mean? They don't like. People love a winner. People love to stick their finger in there and see who's got the most momentum. You know what I mean? Like, you like what you want to do is good.
In some cases, it was easier to get behind the Green New Deal than it would be to get behind HR.
Yeah, because it's like, the Green New Deal is. I mean, that's what on both sides, people who are criticizing it and people who are for it. It's a framework. It's a vision. It's not, solid policy. I mean, they're always writing the bills that will kind of inform the Green New Deal. It's not like there's a package of bills that are like, this is the Green New Deal. It's a resolution, whereas you all have a bill. So I would say the other things are, there's just an increasingly awareness that justice and racial justice and social justice needs to be at the center, and worker transition. And the dividend gets to that. It does. The dividend makes a big deal. And I think that can be emphasized. But it's not like when you do this kind of standards, like kind of a requirement that we must get to carbon neutrality at some point, and then you kind of and then you say we're going to spend all this money, but we're going to do it in a way that makes sure lower income communities are brought along, indigenous communities of color, and you're able to talk about and kind of break the funding down and say we're going to put 40% towards EJ communities, and we're going to put, then that's a way to like kind of build the coalition, and that's not as inherent, I think, in a more targeted way. And I would say also that there's a little bit of cynicism or on the left, and part of this is the failure of the cap and trade bill. The cap and trade bill that I worked hard to try and pass back in 2008, 2009 was kind of a economist way of tackling climate change, and we can do it through the market. We can let the market take its course if we properly price carbon and build in those externalities and those costs. And I think there's just a streak in the progressive movement that looks down on those kind of, I think some people would say it's a neoliberal policy or a neoliberal way of tackling a solution and giving too much credit to the markets, and then it needs to be a wholesale. But again, going back to your point, Chris, though, I see them as interwoven, and like if you were able to, the last thing, if you're able to put a price, then you get the market jump started, and then you also can do these other policies too. But what I would say with the investments piece, there's a lot of good political support for dividends and direct checks to people, but there's also, politicians are always looking to try and get money back to their state in different ways rather than just like everyone in America gets a check. It's like, no, well, we should invest actually in the Great Lakes because the Great Lakes are so key to the fresh water we need. Or like people are like, no, but forests, we need to be investing in good management of our forests because, and so there's whenever you have a revenue raiser, there's revenue raising policy, there's always a fight and always good ideas over where the money should be going. And so the standards investment justice kind of approach kind of allows for people to have their own pet projects, if you will.
Okay.
And that's kind of without earmarks. I am of the opinion, I know I'm going over time. I am of the opinion that Congress would work better if they could bring back earmarks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Bentley. Your insights were really, really helpful and we really appreciate your time. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you. I'm just gonna go on, I'm gonna stay on, but I'm gonna go off video. Thank you so much. I really respect you all and please keep working hard for me and my kids.
We will. Thank you. Okay. So for the rest of our meeting,